Anacortes City Council meeting of February 10th, 2025. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Hoagland, take the roll, please.
Mr. Fantini? Here. Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath?
Here.
Ms. Moulton?
Here.
Mr. McDougall? Ms. Hubick?
Here. Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton.
I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mr. McDougall from tonight's meeting.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Fantini to excuse Mr. McDougall. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, just announcements and committee reports, just a couple from me. So President's Day holiday is coming up, and that's Monday, February 17th, so that's next Monday. City offices and facilities will be closed on Monday. Solid waste and recycling, there will be no service on Monday, and we'll collect both Monday and Tuesday customers on Tuesday, February 18th, and waste management follows our schedule as normal for recycling and yard waste pickup. Also, typically per council procedures, when we have a holiday on Monday, council meets on Tuesday the following day, and that's the 18th. But due to a very likelihood of not having a quorum on the 18th, and I've polled most of council, and you all were good with not having a meeting, and we don't have any pressing business. In fact, Mr. Hagan, who was scheduled, has gladly rescheduled to a different date. So unless there are any objection, we will postpone that meeting till the regular meeting on the 24th. All right, more announcements, committee reports. 3A, Housing Affordability and Community Service Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Thank you. We had a committee meeting on February 5th. I was the only council member there, so I will do a quick review. We went through the CDBG funds. We have a total of about $157,000. 2021 was about 33,000 left. 2022 was about 17, and then 2024 is about 106. And so we've done quite a few projects with that. Just a quick summary: curb cuts, disabled access on 24th and H, public services for the Family Center. Floor repair and replacement, Salvation Army is in process. Exterior maintenance for AFC housing shelter, and then roof removal and replacement, I believe, for the Housing Authority. So we have used up that $157,000, all except for about $25,000 of it, which we're in the process of doing with Salvation Army, and then there might be a little bit left over to then put back for another small project, about $7,000 or $8,000. But that's really great. We will submit those final completed projects. Need to go back to CDBG for actual funding. That was one of those things that had been frozen for a period of time a couple weeks ago. And the 2025 grant period is open right now until February 21st. And the other thing that came up, just as a point of interest, that this committee and probably all of council will need to discuss, is the fact that it is specified for qualifying for some federal funds, such as CDBG, that we need to do an analysis of impediments every 5 years. And so we have not completed one in quite some time. I think 2009 was the last. We kind of were able to piggyback off of the 2023 analysis that was done by the county, but staff is doing a little bit more of a deep dive to figure out the scope of that project and what impact it has for us. But that kind of analysis runs about $15,000 to $20,000. So before we do it, I want to make sure we really need to do it. So there's some light discussion on that. Always fun. Then that was about it. So thanks.
All right. Any questions for HACS Committee?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
Ms. Cleveland McGrath, just to make sure I was understanding, what you're saying is that we're going to wait to see if we need to do that before we spend the money, which would be very prudent and a great thing to do. Am I clear on that?
Yes.
Okay.
We aren't quite sure it's there, and staff has identified that we are not necessarily in compliance at
Okay.
first glance.
Right.
But we want to make sure that the scope of what we need and that we can't, somehow satisfy that in some more cost-effective way.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Next up, Planning Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Planning Committee met at 5 o'clock today, and we were joined by 2 planning commissioners, Linda Martin and Wilma Combs, and we had staff there, John Coleman, Planning Director, and Libby Grage, Senior Planner. And we talked first about the Skagit Transit long-range transit plan that they've been working on for quite some time with some consultants, and have come up with improvement ideas for service all around the county, including Anacortes. One of the ideas being to have continuous service between Anacortes and Mount Vernon, which means not having to change buses at March's Point, and how good that would be. Also talking about some timing improvements, having those more frequent over time so people can count on them more for commuting to and fro, and some other changes as well. So we looked at some of those proposals and decided as a group that, we felt that they're net positives, that the service will just be better. So we'll submit comments to that effect, and it's just good to see progress being made in that direction, because we see a lot of empty buses with 1 or 2 people on them, and how can we improve ridership and serve the people that would like to use transit or need to use transit. Then the next thing we talked about, we had Dustin Johnson from the Anacortes Family Center come, and we talked about a property that the Family Center owns on 31st Street and different possibilities for what could be constructed there. So we talked about cottage housing, which is not universally loved. We talked about potentially having a 4-plex or a 5-plex, what that would look like. And then also just holding up different examples to compare. And one being, when legislation goes into effect very soon, that it's a double lot, could build 2 single-family residences and 4 ADUs on that double lot. And is that more or less desirable than a 4-plex or a 5-plex? So we had an animated conversation about that, and there will be more to follow on that. But just always trying to look at our zoning and see how we can improve it and create the best, most appropriate housing that we can, and increase availability and affordability for both renters and homeowners in our city. Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
No, I promise I won't keep interjecting, but I thought it was just such a wonderful thing to be talking about, transportation and trying to hone in on what we need and how best it can serve the people of our community. It's a wonderful thing. I think we've all seen those buses, and I'm glad we have the buses, but, again, trying to figure out how do we move the mindset of all of us, really, to believe that it's not only environmentally more friendly than all the cars, if you have to weigh those things, but also it's a great mode of transportation. And so yeah, I really appreciate that.
Any other questions for Planning Committee? All right, next up, Port City Liaison Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
The Port City Liaison Committee met last Tuesday, and we discussed single agenda item, the Port City Event Center proposal. The Port said a number of nice things about their confidence in the city and the project overall, and the Port's outside counsel attended the meeting to provide her edits to our 2 draft agreements. We went over each of those edits. Suffice to say, we were all right with all of those edits. Mostly significant is the fact that the Port has dropped their ask for financial contingencies in the event that they lose money on the operation of the event center. We agreed to meet again in 2 weeks, which would be 1 week from tomorrow so that we can keep these agreements moving forward. But then we met internally today to talk more about what is going to be required on the advice of our bond counsel for bonding this project. So we provided some heads up to the port that we're going to need to suggest some additional changes to the agreements in order to make the entire arrangement kosher with bond counsel and underwriting. So that will be coming. The agreements will get more complicated as a result. But we met today, we'll probably meet next week, and then we may meet with the port either next week or the week after, and then we have a regularly scheduled meeting the following week. So there will be plenty of opportunities to chat with the port about that, and we'll report back when we have some clear guidance from bond counsel about what is required of us.
All right. Any questions for Port City? All right. Next up, IT Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
IT Committee met last week, and we had also one agenda item, and that's staff's proposed upgrade of the city's phone system. They're looking at a switch from our current on-prem voice-over IP system to a cloud-based voice-over IP system. The upfront costs of that transition will be relatively low, likely within the $40K that is budgeted for that transition. It probably will come in right about $39K. But the ongoing costs of the new cloud-based VoIP system will be substantially more than we currently pay, more than double what we currently pay, probably $53,000 a year. And a large portion of that is attributable to the fact that we will have to pay fees and taxes that we currently don't have to pay because we're an on-prem system. But nearly everybody is going to a cloud-based system, and it reduces the costs of our administration of the system. We asked several questions about redundancy and contingencies in the event we lose internet access, and staff answered those questions to our satisfaction. So that'll be coming forward to council sometime in the near future.
Questions for IT? Other committee reports or announcements?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. I just wanted to let all of council know that I'm going to send you guys an email with a recording. Last Thursday, the Association of Washington Cities did a presentation online with the National League of Cities, Puget Sound Regional Council, and representation from Senator Murray's office. And they really did a great discussion of the updates of how the impacts of the new federal funding directives and how they're impacting local governments. A lot of it is unknown and constantly changing, but it was pretty informative of how local municipalities need to think about our federal funds and be thoughtful and also communicative. One of the big things that I took away was that Patty Murray's office and also the National League of Cities really stress the importance of talking to them about what grants are important to Washington, what grants are important to our city, and then also if there's any pauses or challenges with funding, and then also talk about, just communicate what grants are working well, because as we go into the next budget season, there's going to be a lot of things on the chopping block. So making sure that it's from the cities that they get a lot of their information of how things are working. And I think that it was informative, and I highly recommend everyone watching it at their own time. I will send out the link to the recording. There's some, it was good, and it made me want to talk to our finance committee and really, going back to like a broken record, we need to talk about our revenue sources and make sure that we have a candid conversation in the near future about what federal monies are coming through, such as CDBG, and what we should just, have on the radar as to FEMA money and things like that. So I will send that out, but please do not reply all.
Always a good reminder. Mr. Young?
Thank you. Just in that same vein, as a city of people, there are a lot of components that come together to make us have the city that we do. And we're very fortunate to have it. I love it here, and many of you in one side or other about trying to protect the quality of life that we have here. I just wanted to point out that the hospital itself is beginning to have some meetings that I think that you should tune your ear to. We have a great hospital. The fight is to try to keep it and keep it viable, which also makes our city a wonderful place. And so I just wanted to put that bug in your ear. I think the meetings will be, more announcements will be coming forward, but I think the onus is on us as citizens in this city is to participate in those discussions so we understand what's taking place. Of course, there's always the push from the south and the push from the north. In small hospitals across the country, you know, it's a difficult place to be in, particularly with reimbursements being what they are right now, and it's not necessarily an overuse of money. Things are being tightened in every front, no different than our city at all. So I just want to kind of put that in because it's part of what makes our city so special and wonderful to have the hospital we do. And so we all want to make sure that we're participating with them and trying to figure out solutions for going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And thanks, Ms. Cleveland-McGrath, for sending that out. I know the city has a great partnership with the Association of Washington Cities, and I happen to be meeting with a federal representative staffer tomorrow. So, all right. Any other announcements or committee reports? All right, we're on to public comment, and nobody signed up for public comment, but that doesn't mean I won't give anybody the opportunity to come up. Okay, I got a couple hands raised. But go ahead, come on up. Yep. I like to pretend like I don't know anybody's name, so everybody can equally is available to speak. But please state your name and the city you live.
Steve Anderson, Anacortes. So I'm in the process of getting the fiber optic cable brought up into my house. And initial assessment done was at the have to start my next door neighbor's box and then tunnel across near the curb and then come over to my house. So my neighbor's not too crazy about that, but I'm pretty sure perhaps the attorney can tell me if the city's legal right-of-way from the curb, the access into the private property extends what?
I think it depends on what the easement is for. But
Fiber optic cable.
Yeah, I probably will have to take that offline to look it up. I know the attorneys looked at dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of easements for our fiber optic project. So maybe provide the details to her after the meeting, and we'll get you an answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you bet. All right.
Linda Martin, Anacortes. Last week, I came before you complaining about getting tricked about money for a park. Today, I am coming to you to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It wasn't more than a couple of days. I heard from 2 council members and the mayor, and the situation has been resolved, is my understanding. There is now money for a park. Probably none of us will benefit from that, but the children in our neighborhood will, and it's a big thing to them. And so I just want to say thank you for being a responsive government. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, anybody else?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
And just for everybody watching at home, that's money for park design. Design.
Design for the West 6th Park. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda, items 5A through C. Council.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton.
I move we approve consent agenda items 5A through C.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Young to approve consent agenda items A through C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 6, which is other business. First up on other business is Planning, Community, and Economic Development 2025 Department Update. Information only item.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, members of the public. My name is John Coleman. I'm the Director of Planning, Community, and Economic Development for the city. And tonight I'm going to give our annual Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department update. All right. So, as I go through this, if you have questions, I guess I'll kind of leave it up to you and the mayor how you want to handle it. If you want to ask questions as we go along, or if you want to wait till the end. I've got about, I think, 20 slides or so. And
So if you got burning questions, sure, we'll go.
So the council's going to know a lot of this, but this is also for the benefit of the public. So, going to have some fairly basic information for you. So bear with me. What is Planning, Community, and Economic Development? I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about some of the specifics of each of the 3 departments, subcategories of the department. We have...
Can you get a little bit closer to the microphone, or?
I thought these new mics were supposed to fix that.
We're all
Sorry.
getting used to them.
I'm happy to speak up. So we have 3 divisions. We have planning, we have housing/economic development, and kind of catch-all field, and that's under Stephanie Snyder. And then, of course, we have the building department. In the building department, we have a permit coordinator and 2 building inspectors/code enforcement officers. Currently, we're holding 1 building inspector position vacant to address, to help address some of the tight financial constraints that the city's undergoing. So our department is elected to go without that, and so work a little harder to save some money for the city. And then over in the planning department, we have a senior planner and an associate associate planner. And that's just a fun photo of us. Stephanie designed this to be like a rock star portrait. So we don't have our instruments here, though. So what do we do? We administer the community development block grant and housing activities of the city. So we have the housing action plan that we're working on implementing. Stephanie is also our housing coordinator part-time, as well as planning, as well as all of her other duties. Stephanie helps staff the Economic Development Committee and the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. And so through her efforts and my efforts, we coordinate with the Chamber and the Port to promote business retention, growth, and attraction, administer the lodging tax funds for tourism promotion, and there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with that after people apply, and then Stephanie keeps track of their payments and makes sure that everybody's getting paid, and we're doing it in a way that meets state auditor requirements. She also oversees special event permits for parades, festivals, and as you all know, we have a lot of those in town, so it's a lot of coordination, and she provides a lot of help to people that are trying to put on an event, and these are not professional event planners sometimes, so she is helping the community achieve their goals. We also have frontline customer service at the permitting center. That's building permits, land use permits, as well as right-of-way permits and engineering permits come through our office, even though engineering is part of Public Works Department. So we have a lot of coordination between several departments in the permitting center, including fire and other parts of Public Works, such as water and solid waste and wastewater. Some of the core things that the planning long-range department does is, prepare, implement, and administer land use plans, policies, and codes, and then regulate those as through the permit center. So first we create the rules for development, and then as people submit their permits, we make sure that those applications are meeting our goals and our requirements. And then, of course, we staff several city council committees. We serve the city council as well as the mayor, of course, and we also staff the planning commission. Under PCED, we staff a lodging tax advisory committee, planning committee, economic development committee, and one other one that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. There's so many. Oh, the Port City Liaison Committee. So I'll just move right on to what's going on in the building department. Obviously, it goes without saying, they process building permits and inspect properties to make sure that they're being built to code. But there's a lot of other things going on in the building department these days, including our building official, Rob Frisinger, got a $197,000 grant for improving our paperless permitting system. That's through the Department of Commerce. Of that $197,000, we're using a small part, about $7,000, to do some quick improvements to SmartGov. And, we've been working on a contract with them, and their contracting department took months and months and months to approve a simple contract that we finally got pushed through this week. And that's just that $7,000 contract to do some implementation that they were supposed to have done in the first place.
So with the ball game going on downstairs, make sure we're a little bit closer to the mic. Sorry, John.
I'll continue to try.
There we go.
The big part of that $197,000 we're going to be using, or we are using, with the outside contractor to review our development review process, and that work is underway. They will be reviewing our as-is process, so how we process permits, how we interact between departments, how it is passed through from person to person, and analyzing it. They are contacting past users of our system to ask their opinions and get feedback. And there'll be more targeted work coming up as well. They'll be coming to the city here shortly to work with staff to see exactly how things work and lay eyes on the process. And then they will be creating recommendations after debriefing us at the end of their visit. Then they'll go back and create best management practices to help define a to-be, like it's going to be this way in the future. So diagramming how our processes could work better and making several recommendations. And then throughout 2025, and probably for much longer, we'll be working on implementing those recommendations. So it's hard to tell exactly what those recommendations are going to be and what that implementation is going to look like, but we're committed to doing so. And then finally, that the rest of that $197,000 grant we're going to be using for doing some digital scanning to get existing building and planning permits taken from paper and putting them into digital format, which will then be available online through Laserfiche.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
I just heard this, how much was the SmartGov contract for?
It was like
Oh,
6,900.
it was
It's
super small.
just
It
a
was like
little
7,000.
thing, yeah. It's been very frustrating
That
that their
seems like-
contracting department took so long for such a simple contract.
That's why I was like, I must have heard that wrong, but okay, thank you.
And we are reserving money also from this $197,000 to help with some of the implementation of the consultant's recommendations, particularly targeting needed changes in SmartGov, because we're well aware that SmartGov is not as user-friendly as one would hope it to be, and so we're coming up with a plan to make it work better. And so what is going on as far as building? Well, not a lot of major projects going on out there right now that are under construction. Now, in the land use end, and there's a little bit more to talk about. This is just construction projects underway, and I apologize, they're in completely random order. They're not in any sort of order at all. We know that the Crosswinds cottages, there's 18 units out there. I believe they're working on 3, and there's either 3 or 4 lots left to go. So we estimate that's about 70% done for the entire project, but the 3 that are under construction are pretty close to being complete, as I understand. The Habitat Parkside duplexes on 29th Street across from Storvik. Those are, we estimate about 25% done. There's a 2-unit building that they haven't even poured a foundation for, while the other buildings, they're just kind of coming out of the ground, getting them framed up. The Samish low-income cottages off of D Street around 34th, those 15 units were completed 100% several months ago, but it was a big project, so I wanted to leave it on there and highlight that was a successful project that the Samish was very pleased with its result. The Easy Street cottages, those are another cottage project across the street from the store on Commercial. There's 6 units there. I believe they're all under construction, like 4 or 3 are done completely and 3 are almost done. 32nd Street cottages, those are the ones at 32nd and D roundabout. Those 6 units, the black and white ones, those are now 100% complete. The Welsh brothers are building an industrial building. You can see it on Stevenson, but you can see it from Highway 20. So if you see a big metal structure up there, that's what's going on. It's just an industrial shell building. That's about halfway done. The hospital recently completed their rooftop helipad. That was a very interesting and quite a cool project if you're a building person, because there's a lot to look at. It was just a really interesting construction project, and that is completely done. I am not sure. We have not talked to them about what's going to happen with the old helipad. Presumably, they'll repurpose that space. And then Samish Early Learning Center on D Avenue. The building's about 70% done. There's a lot of site work and other road work that needs to be done in that area. But the building is about 70% done. So I mentioned that there's not a lot of building significant projects under construction right now. And so here is our housing unit trends. This map, this chart has on the bottom part, the solid part is our Anacortes housing units issued, the number of permits issued, not permits issued, actually, permits for units issued. So this is a count of units, and it's broken up into different types. And those are listed on the bottom, color coordinated. There's also a blue line across the top. That is units issued nationally in thousands. So obviously it's a much bigger number than ours. But you can see the trend is not too dissimilar from our trend. There's not quite the same low in 2023, but that we had in Anacortes, but you can see that it is a similar trend. Similarly, the purple line that unfortunately only goes to 2023 is Skagit County's. They only had data available through University of Washington through 2023, and you can see that it is a similar trend there. I'm certainly interested to see what happened between 23 and 24 in Skagit County, but unfortunately that was not available.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
If you go back to that last slide, thank you. This is the first time we're seeing this. The purple line, Skagit units, is that Skagit County government issued permits, like in the unincorporated areas, or do you mean the entirety of Skagit County?
You know, I think that's Skagit County. These are aggregated numbers through University of Washington housing market report, and that's the number that they had.
So is it correct to say, based on what we're looking at in the chart, that Anacortes had almost all of the units produced in Skagit County in 2021?
No, I think I think it's also like a
that can't be
factor of
right,
100
right?
or something. Yeah, I was not. Rob put this together for me, and I neglected to ask him that question. I had the same thought. Like clearly, we did not account for all of the building permits in 2021, and so
Right. 160, I do think, is the right number in 2021 for Anacortes's number of dwelling units, or close to that.
And that's issued.
I don't think it's
not finished, but that's issued.
issued. Yeah, I think that's just not. It's not possible. The purple line is correct, but the rest of it looks to me.
I
like
think
it's
it must be like a factor of 100 or
Something.
or something.
Something
Yes.
like that.
I apologize, I don't have that information.
I would still be interested in the chart if seeing a correction to it. It does seem to me that the trend line, while similar to the national trend and to the, well, whatever the purple line represents, it has fallen off harder in Anacortes in 2023 than elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've had a lot of discussion about why that is. And what that led me down the path of trying to find other communities that are more similar to Anacortes. We have a different demographic, obviously an older demographic, second homes, and so that's something that I'm interested in looking into, is someplace like Gig Harbor have a similar trend line, or if anybody has any other interesting comps where you have high value property and so we're constrained by price more so than other jurisdictions, Washington, and our demographics different. So I've been looking for an interesting comp. I mean, West Coast California cities may even be interesting comps, but that's California, so it's hard to tell.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yeah, so that Anacortes compared to the rest of the county and compared largely to the rest of the state, we historically have had a much higher rate of cash buyers because they're retirees, which would potentially lead to not being as impacted by interest rates. And it's significant. I want to say almost double the amount of cash buyers that you would see in the rest of Skagit County. So I think that's worth a discussion. That is one of those things we should discuss, but I also, that should be factored in just as much as the age of the community, because I actually think that allows a little bit more flexibility when building and purchasing property if you're doing it with cash than if you're having to be dependent on interest rates, especially in the last couple of years.
Because we have a lot more high value homes, like it is hard for us to find a decent comp in Washington State. That's why I was thinking maybe Gig Harbor. If anybody else has any other great ideas.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini?
just a question, but as we look at other places in Skagit County, one of the things that always strikes me around here, that we haven't really brought up is that there's just not a huge availability of land. So you're left to density only, which, you know, my question would be, in compared to Skagit County, like when we look at Mount Vernon, when we look at the other Burlington, the other places in Skagit County, do they have significantly or do they have more land available to build on, which is maybe why their numbers aren't falling and ours are?
Yes to the first part and probably no to the second part. So Burlington does have more land, but they're constrained by the river and floodplain and farms. So they are not going to be able to expand their urban growth area much. So they do have a focus on infill, and they've also, I would hazard to guess the reason that that purple line in 2023 is remaining steady and not dropping like Anacortes is the fact that they've issued something like permits for something like 1,500 apartment units in Burlington alone over the past 2 or 3 years. So that might be what's keeping that trend line from diving. Cedar Woolley has more land. Burlington has more land. The difference, I think, is in Cedar Woolley, several large apartment buildings have also been permitted, but not to the scale of Burlington. And I think in Mount Vernon, there's also some more multifamily. This is units, so this it's not permits, it's units. And you know, one 65-unit apartment building makes a big dent compared to one single-family residential unit on a chart like this.
Member Miller?
Mr. Young?
You may be going to get to it. Part of, I'm sure your discussion about the trends, and John, I know you've looked at it. You mentioned we've got a consultant coming to look at processes and, you know, whether or not they're efficient or not. There was some discussion among some builders that were struggling just a little bit, simply because I think when we were looking at software within the department, there were some challenges to the software and the processes of coming in. And so some of the builders were saying that because of that frustration, they were not willing to build in Anacortes. And I think that that's been part of a discussion that's been ongoing. I know you've been working hard to solve those problems. The mayor, of course, have done his part to meet with people about it. If it's not in your presentation, would you elaborate a little bit on what steps we've taken to alleviate that? Again, the only reason I'm bringing it up is that, you know, I've been approached, and, you know, of course, you know, builders are looking to build, they're looking to sell, and so I just wanted you to
answer your
elaborate
question,
a little bit on that
we've hired a
as well.
consultant at great expense to review our processes and help us implement SmartGov better. So that's a major step. So we're self-examining. We're also making, you know, constantly making adjustments to SmartGov to make sure that it works better. We're in constant communication with the developers and people that apply to make sure that, you know, if there's issues, we're addressing them and fixing them, and they're an important partner in making sure that the process is working better. Through that process, we determined that there's significant snags in our development review process. Part of it is we're in the transition period from a small town to a small city, and, you know, just one or two people in the permitting department kind of keeping everything in their head and juggling a bunch of balls doesn't work so well anymore when you have more pressure and more complexities. I think the tipping point was when we introduced SmartGov, and there's a steep learning curve, that it required a lot more understanding and coordination between our departments, and it brought to light that we need to button up our process better in order to make it work better. So it's no more just walking from desk to desk being like, here, I'm done with this. You take it now. So it's growing pains, for sure.
Okay, no, I really appreciate that. I just thought that it would be good, to mention it not only for the public, because I know that the mayor's phone has been ringing, mine's been ringing, and I know your phone has been ringing, and I know you're working on it. So, okay, thank you.
So while we were going through this process, came across this interesting tidbit in the University of Washington Housing Market Report just from last quarter, 2024. This is a chart of home sales. And you can see that there was a huge drop in home sales between 2021 and 2023. Largely speculation is I'm sure there's numerous factors, but interest rates are largely the driver there. There's not a chart for this in the UW report, but they're saying building permit activity is just barely blipping up 1.4% from a year earlier. It's still surprisingly 50% or more than 50% of those were single-family residential units. Now, what was interesting about this is that it also, whether there's a correlation or not, we haven't done a statistical analysis, but these charts do actually look fairly similar in even though we're talking about existing home sales to new housing starts. So I'm unsure that there's any correlation, but at least it's interesting to look at that and say, oh, those two charts are resembled. So it could be false logic and not worth looking into, but hey, it's data, it's fun.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cluey-McGrath?
So that is the third quarter of each year, correct? That is not the accumulation of the entire year, year to year.
This is from quarter 3 of 2014 to quarter 3 of 2024.
So it's looking at just that quarter from year to year versus the entire year, right? I mean, we can see kind of ebbs and flows, and when you're taking 3 months out of a year versus the entire year.
Well, they're pretty smoothed, so it doesn't look like it's jumping from quarter to quarter. It looks like it's incorporating all of the quarters, and it's just indicating quarter 3.
The markers are just the quarters.
The markers are just the quarters.
Okay.
So
All
it is,
right.
it is annualized data.
Okay.
And like I said, they're not sure what to do with this chart. It's just fairly interesting that it's not too dissimilar from the housing units issued by type.
Hey, Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini?
I was looking at that too, and how I kind of read that is because the last data I believe you said we have available is quarter 3 of 2024
Well, that's just for Skagit County as a whole.
for Skagit County. So if this is a Skagit County graph, I think that's just the markers.
No, this is all of the state. The existing home sales is for all the state.
So do we have, so
And then if you look at the chart on the left, the blue line at the top is the housing units issued for the state.
now,
This top blue line here is housing issued in the state.
Yeah, anybody who's taken a cartography class wouldn't be terribly happy with that graph, but
Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. I thought I'd throw it out there. There's probably not anything there, but so I'll move on. This is, in the past, we've presented pie charts of how many unit types were issued by year. This year, we had received feedback that it didn't compare that. While the pie charts are helpful, it doesn't compare it from year to year. So this is another bar chart trying to show that, so you have an idea of how many total units were issued from year to year,
Mayor
while
Miller?
also showing
Ms.
the
Moulton?
unit types.
I apologize for interrupting. I understand ADU is accessory dwelling unit. What is ALT issued?
Okay, so you've got the ADU new, so that's a new construction ADU, whereas the blue ADU ALT is an alteration of an existing structure to make it into an ADU.
Which requires a permit.
Yeah, they both require
Yeah,
permits.
okay, thank you.
It's a good question, because I looked at that too and had to think about it for a moment. Okay, so moving on to the planning division. There's a lot going on in the planning department currently. As everybody, I'm sure, is well aware, we're working on our 2025 comprehensive plan update, which will include development regulation updates. This is, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but shameless plug, if you're interested in the 2025 comp plan, just go to www.planacortes.org, and we have a tremendous amount of information there. Of course, in the planning division, we're going to continue processing land use applications. That's kind of the bread and butter of what people think of when they think of the planning department, reviewing and issuing long plats, short plats, other land use permits, lots of shoreline permits because we have a lot of shoreline. And a really big part of what we'll be doing this year is the development review process improvements that I already spoke to that are kind of spearheaded by the building department. The building official is the person that's the project manager on that. But it will touch all departments, including public works departments and fire and engineering. So that's a major part of what's going on in the department this year. We are working on an economic development strategic plan, which, side note, got a draft just before this meeting. So I'll try to send that out tonight to the committee members that are working on that project. We're also working on a Sharps Corner site analysis study, long awaited. I have a check-in with them at the end of the month. The consultant's working on that. And the idea of that study is to look at look at the city-owned property at Sharps Corner, and we're looking at the available land, the constraints on the land, and getting an idea of what can be built there based on the constraints and some of the things that might need to be done, like addressing transportation, for example. There's a part of that project is briefly looking at the economics of a project, like what's the need for housing in the area, but that's the intent is for the city to ultimately provide the land somehow, either with a partner to develop it for multifamily and commercial, more affordable housing in that area, addressing what types of affordable housing, like we want to make sure that we've got a variety of housing and not just one type of housing. And as well as looking at how we're going to entertain requests from partners to either buy or lease the land to do a project that the city wants. So trying to create a pathway for people, the developers that want to partner with the city to use that land.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. This is something we've been talking about well before your time and probably mine as well. So we have a consultant that's looking at this right now. Is that a contract that we've seen at council that somehow I'm forgetting?
It's $35,000, so that would have been under council's, under the mayor's authority to sign without going to council.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't forgetting. And so we've also talked about some of the constraints on that property, like a potential gas line and wetlands and all kinds of things. So this initial study, it will analyze what the buildable area is, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Like we really need to put our finger on like what is the impact of that gas line that goes through. There's power lines on the west side, and then it just goes up into the hills and is too steep of terrain and hard to access. So Yes, those are exactly the kind of constraints that we're looking at.
Great, and then I expect we'll get a report on that here at council and the public. And then
Of course.
also, I think part of what we've discussed in the past is having an RFP at some point, and I know this is down the line, so that we have an idea of what we want to do. Like you were saying, like what does the city want? What do we need? And then we can establish parameters for going out for RFPs, right?
Yeah, and this document is intended to help put some guidelines on how the city can go about doing that.
Great, well, I'm really looking forward to this.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Who's the consultant working on that?
Makers.
Makers. And do you know when they're going to deliver this analysis?
I believe the contract is in May.
Okay, thanks.
All right, other things going on is the City Port Event Center, which we already received we received a report from Councilmember Walters today, but Planning Department is in the thick of that project as well as, since we're involved in LTAC, Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, funding, it's a nice crossover there. We're also working on, and this has been a lot of work lately, is the Fidalgo Bay Department of Natural Resources lease area. So the area of the Fidalgo Bay Marina and the city commercial dock or boat ramp, the travel lift, the city-owned pier. And so we have a lease with DNR for that, not just water area, but some upland area where there was fill in the past that is used to be water, and so it's still in that lease area. And then we sublease that out to several entities, including the Fidalgo Marina Homeowners Association, and several other companies in the area that use the travel lift and the boat launch. And then there's a private dock two private docks out there also that we have leases for. So we're in the process of figuring out who's who in the zoo. There's a lot of leases. Some of them are old. We're putting all the pieces together. This was all started because in our DNR lease, we're required to replace all the creosote in that DNR lease area by the end of this year. And there's also, and we also have to remove any treated wood that's near the water. And we have to, in the long run, several years down the road, replace any decking that is not graded, and we have to replace it with graded decking to make sure that it allows light through, and that's further down the road. But what it caused us to understand is, we've been subleasing these properties out, and we're just marginally getting back the amount that our lease is with DNR. We have not in the past been planning for future investments and repairs of our own city infrastructure out there, and I'm not going to get into detail about what the city owns, but we own some equipment out there, and we have to maintain that. And we have not been collecting money from people in the past to go into a fund to do long-term repairs and maintenance. And so we have approached all of the users of that area, the people that we have subleases with, and have entered into a very nice conversation with them to be very upfront about, we're going to need to make improvements, and how are we all going to be partners in making these things happen in a way that is not going to financially destroy the city. Right now we know we're estimating it's going to cost several $100,000 to replace the creosote, and we've had this conversation, and it's in the CFP to do so. Now we're approaching the users of the area to see how they can be a partner in that. And the conversation's been really good so far, so we're very appreciative of that. Well, in the long run, we need to also address a breakwater that is needs repair from what we understand. And that's another great expense. And so we'll be working with those same users to address that issue also.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Young?
Thank you. I appreciate that we're looking at all of these things now. You know, what may have worked in the past for whatever reason. You know, I think from a budget standpoint, you know, the mayor, even when he was a council member, always talked about tight budgets over and over again, which is a good thing. As Mr. Hoagland does, he squeezes our pennies real tight, which is a good thing, too, until you need to spend some. But I really appreciate that we're going to take a look at those things. It's not to raise prices on anyone, but it's also to be fair to keep the updates that we have to do in this city and to just keep it functioning the way that we do. And so sometimes those are difficult discussions to have, but ones that we must make and must do. On just to go back on one thing that you made earlier, once the study comes out about Sharks Corner, you know, I think in some of these things, I think it would be great to come before council and we have a lengthy and deep discussion about where we want to go, how we want to get there, and then target those things. And so, okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yep, that is the intent of those studies, not to go sit on a shelf.
And I'm sure there's a few other things that we're doing in the planning department, but I'm not remembering them at the moment. All very important, nonetheless. As far as the periodic update, the comp plan update, we're well through the process of the population projections, and I'm going to show those really quick so that people that haven't had the opportunity to see them will see those. But those are the population projections we're using and the unemployment projections we're using to make sure that we have enough zoning in the city to accommodate 20 years worth of growth, both jobs growth and residential growth. We're also this year, as I'm sure the council is well aware, making sure that we have enough housing for all different types of area median income earning people. And that's been a challenging math problem, as well as how a good exercise of where different types of housing should be located in the city. We've done a lot of that work already, but it's continuing. We're also creating a new climate element that has two portions to it. One is a resiliency sub-element, so that is how are we going to manage our growth in the future as we encounter hotter summers, wetter winters, more frequent and stronger storm events, sea level rise, and other wildfires and wildfire smokes, other hazards that are attributed to climate change. And this is something that the state is required for us to do. And then there's another portion of that element will address greenhouse gas emissions. And so we're required to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions overall as a city. And so we've been working with the climate action team to look at goals and policies in the climate element to help achieve this. And we've also done a greenhouse gas inventory to see how much greenhouse gas is produced through the city, whether it's buildings or transportation or recreation and other industry and whatnot that contributes. During our periodic update is our only opportunity every 10 years to update our urban growth area boundaries. So we did a land capacity analysis and made sure that we have enough land and zoning within the city to accommodate all of our different types of housing needs and our population growth in general, as well as our jobs growth. And we determined that we did not need to do an urban growth area expansion. That's just a reminder, because I know the council knows this because they passed a resolution supporting a UGA expansion, not to include any of lands for development, but we do have an urban growth area expansion request at the county to add a little over 100 acres of land to the ACFL and parks and public zone. And that is at the county now. Next week they are, or is it actually this week, they're having a work session at the county to determine whether or not that application should be put on the county docket, and then they'll be having a public hearing on it in 2 weeks. And then we still need to work on our critical areas update, critical areas ordinance update. We haven't really started on that. We've been focusing on goals and policy updates to all of our elements and creating goals and policies for the climate element. So just for good measure to have this up, this is our population increase for the next 20 years is expected to be about 5,000 new residents and about 3,145 new jobs. That's 27% more residents and 33% more jobs. Now that number seems jarring when you look at it that way. These numbers are actually down from the 80s, 90s, and thousands. And as I was mentioned, we are planning different housing types according to area median income. As a reminder, the 2024 area median income in the Anacortes Mount Vernon area is $102,800 per household. And then we broke up there's using the state required Department of Commerce tools that allocates those, it determines how much housing in each of the subcategories or brackets in the area median income, and that's what those numbers are here. So we have to provide a lot more 0 to 30 and 31 to 50% of the AMI than we do of other types of housing.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Yo?
Thank you. Just to be clear, when you're saying we have to provide, what you're saying is we have the opportunity for builders or some developer to come along and decide that they want to build it. We have the, the opportunity versus the city itself trying to go out and build, because we still have to depend on people willing to come, organize, spend the money in order to build the buildings.
Thank you very much. I was lazy in how I presented that. You're absolutely correct, and that is a really important nuance that I should have pointed out.
No,
the city is not responsible for either making this happen, so we don't require that people build in these different AMI brackets. We don't build housing ourselves, but all we need to do is make sure that we have the zoning and policies in place to make sure that people can achieve these goals.
Perfect. Just
Thank
if
you.
I could elaborate just a little further, Mayor. And part of that is, I think the hope of the committee, Housing HACS Committee, as well as to help coordinate. I think in the past, the HACS Committee has met with builders too to try to figure out what are some impediments or the things that could be in place in order to encourage builders to build. That's part of this universe of things that have to be in place in order for us to begin to address those needs. Correct?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
So, moving on from the long-range part of the planning division, we're moving on to the land use part. So what are the upcoming land use projects that are going on? Well, continued the land subdivision at the MJB property, also called Fidalgo Landing. The status of that is we have sent the applicant a request for additional information a little over a year ago, and we're still waiting for more information back. Guaymas Ferry is working on an electrification project. Now we know that that's run into some snags financially, so that one's moving a little slow, I think, and we just received more information from them, so it is back in the city's court for review. Not court of law, just our ballpark, really. The mixed-use development at the former bowling alley, I know this is one of great interest to people. We've received a site plan review, so that's not the building permit, that's not like construction plans or utilities or anything like that, but it's the site plan review, and the planning department is working on that. So there'd be commercial on the main floor, parking on the main floor, and 64 dwelling units on the stories above. Port of Anacortes is, of course, working on a quite large West Basin redevelopment master plan. That includes the area of the potential event center, partnership with the city. And so they're moving some lines around, redefining parking and developing parking lots. And so there's also tied up in that is the realignment of Market Street and land swaps with the city. It occurred to me with that, they're requesting also to do a boundary line adjustment between the city and the port, so we'll need to bring that request to the council for them to approve any sorts of land swaps before we actually approve a boundary line adjustment, because we'll need the council to approve the mayor the authority to sign. And then the Curtis Wharf repairs are just about done, and the Second Street improvements, those are under construction. I think everybody's aware that the T-dock is being replaced and reconfigured. We have already issued the shoreline substantial development permit for that. And that's a really big project, so it's probably gonna move kind of slowly. They still need in-water work permitting. The port is also working on electric upgrades to serve new electric boats. They just had a pre-app for that. That's at the A-dock. Now, related to this, we all know that, hopefully everybody knows that the port received a large grant to, along with several partners, for electrification purposes. So one of the things that they want to do is bring shore power to the end of their piers to provide power to the large ships that are out there, so those ships don't have to run their generators while in port to have power. We asked the Department of Ecology if that is going to require that, bringing that equipment out is going to require a shoreline substantial development permit, and they said yes. So I talked to the port and said, we'd like to make this easier. This seems pretty minor. You're not doing any in-water work. It's just bringing conduit and wires out. So we submitted comments to the Department of Ecology. They're doing rulemaking right now for their Shoreline Management Act rules, and suggested that they look into making these an exempt activity, because it would have a net ecological benefit to bring power out there and no longer be burning fossil fuels in port. It just seems like it would be a positive thing, and it would be easy, it would make it easier for the ports and other marinas to do this. I also threw in there a comment about pump out, so for wastewater from the boats, make that easier process. And I think that may have gained some traction, and we'll see. It's a several-year process, so I don't know when that's going to come down, but hopefully it does. I know there's been a lot of talk about the Irwin Mixed Use and Events Center in the former pit over there on 10th. We've just had a pre-app with that, and I think we've presented that to City Council informally at various points. But we don't know where that is. It's just, with the developer. It's just a pre-app right now. There is also a pre-app for a hotel to the east of the cannery building. That one seems to be on hold right now. That was a little while ago, so we haven't heard anything new about that project in a while. There's a 20-unit cottage development that's in pre-app off of 17th Street. that's, I know a lot of people have heard about this one for some reason or another. It's at the end of 17th Street, but it's only pre-app. They have asked a lot of questions, and that one does appear to be going forward, so hopefully we'll receive full application in
Mayor
the
Miller?
near future.
Ms. Moulton?
Just a quick question about the location. So when you say the end of 17th Street, are you talking about the west end? So it would be like west of like A, kind of heading up the hill almost?
Yeah, heading up the hill is the best way to put it.
Okay. Huh, okay. Thanks.
Strandberg is also working on a little 6-lot short plat at the end of 16th. That would be on the, I believe that would be more the west end of 16th. And,
Oh, wait, sorry. I thought I did say west end of 17th, did I not?
well, this one's on 16th.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I think I'm a little confused about what 17th does. I think it turns. But anyway, I can show you more. And that one is moving along well, and we might be able to issue preliminary plat fairly soon. And then, of course, Capsana viewpoint improvements moving along nicely. I'm sure everybody's been up there to see those. For good measure, just pointing out the total number of land use permit applications. This is the trend over the past several years. We're kind of holding steady. And I always like to say when I'm talking about number of land use permits, numbers are deceiving for land use permits because not all of them are the same. You know, a simple boundary line adjustment can be done fairly quickly, whereas a planned unit development or that's a bad example. We don't do planned unit developments anymore, but a long plat can take a lot longer, depending, and then it all depends on the site itself too, you know, if there's critical areas. We receive a lot of shoreline variances or shoreline exemptions, so people that have a deck or a dock, for example, and they want to replace the creosote piling and put a new deck out there like that. There's that we can do that under an exemption, but it's still a permit, and we can churn those through fairly quickly depending on the application materials. Then moving on to the Community Development Block Grant. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what a Community Development Block Grant is, it's federal money to improve affordable housing. And so this will be linkable for anybody that wants to look at this information. So fortunately, Councilmember Cleland McGrath kind of gave an update of what just happened with our past CDBG funds. But in this year, for the next year, which goes from July of 24 through June of 25, we received $106,000. We typically give 15% out for public service costs, so that's kind of like administrative soft cost stuff, and then the rest is historically been given out to actual projects. So replacing roofing is something that we've done a lot of over the past few years with given money to the housing authority for that, for example. So the current applications, requests for organizations that are looking for funding goes through February 21st of this year, and then we'll be making that determination of how much is awarded to whom in May. And Councilmember Cleland McGrath also pointed out we need to do an analysis of impediments report. One way of, of course, determining whether or not we really need to do that was the first step. Should we absolutely need to do a new analysis of impediments? We would like to float the idea of using the 20% administrative funds that we're allowed to use out of CDBG to pay for that instead of taking it out of general fund. But that's up to the council to decide how to pay for something like that. But we do anticipate it to be about $15,000 or $20,000 to do that report. And it was just an idea of one way to pay for it, coming from CDBG funding. And that is my presentation for tonight. Sorry I ran a little long.
All right, any other questions? I know we didn't have an asterisk on that. Any member of the audience have any burning question want to get on the floor? Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Coleman. And we'll move on to item 6B, which is a contract award for 16th Street and D Avenue improvement. And this is a discussion item with possible action. And I guess, Mr. Lee, you're doing the presentation. All right. Yeah, I wasn't sure that was on. Thank you.
Oh,
But
sorry.
you got a loud voice, so.
The old one always stayed on, so sorry. I bring before you a contract in the amount of $1,170,236.25 with Fisher Construction Group. And this is for the 16th and D Avenue improvement project that the city is constructing in cooperation with the Samish Indian Nation. The city is administering construction management and project management, and the Samish tribe is providing funding for the project. And just as a reminder, this project includes the extension of 16th Street to D Avenue with new sidewalks on both sides and parking, and new sidewalks on both sides of D Avenue from 15th Street to 17th Street. And that will have multiple crosswalks and RRFBs and stormwater improvements. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
All right, council.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
No, I drive by that project daily, and it really is looking wonderful. It's surprising what you could do with a small swath of land and make it, as productive as it looks. So, yeah, no, I just wanted to comment. I see work happening. I love the fact that it will also begin to address some of the needs we're talking about for childcare and, just sort of meeting those needs. And so, yeah, I think it's a wonderful project and really appreciate it again, the work that not only the city and the department did in order to make this project work and be successful. So really wanted to not miss the opportunity to bring that up because it really was a collaborative effort, and it really takes that in order to make things move forward. So thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee. We're excited about this project as a group, I think, and one thing that's missing from this is maps. I think those are always really helpful, and I guess we need to keep saying it. And I really would like to see, because we talked about these improvements in the Public Works Committee, and I believe here at Council as well. And one of the things that we had brought up was the presence of a small, not a roundabout, but a traffic calming device that would be in the center of C Avenue to sort of introduce that concept into the city as something that we might do in other places. And I understand that part of our conversation was it's not an actual intersection right there. The road's not built out C Avenue. But I just wanted to introduce this again because I think that it's a good opportunity to add a traffic calming feature in a place that doesn't yet exist. So it would always be part of that street. And it would show, it wouldn't be like introducing something later and people are already used to going through there at whatever speed. So I would like to discuss the possibility of having that, or at least know the status of it, because I think that that's something that we were pretty in favor of.
Instead of the traffic circle at C and 16th Street, there will be a raised crosswalk, like a speed table, and that was what we elected to go for traffic calming instead. And that's in the plans as it sits.
But your point about the maps is well taken. It's always good to see that. And you could probably see where that speed table would be.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Walters.
can you describe a little more of that raised speed table?
Yeah, it's about 10 feet wide and I think 6 to 8 inches high. And it's where the sidewalk improvements will end. And then it will effectively end the improvements and be a crossing and also provide traffic calming.
Can you describe the parking on the street between C and D?
Yeah, so there'll be impervious concrete, head-in parking closer to D Avenue for access to the Early Learning Center and facilities nearby, and then there'll also be additional parallel parking along 16th between, closer to C Avenue.
Head-in parking meaning diagonal or
No,
parallel to the street?
just square off perpendicular, normal
Perpendicular.
parking, yeah.
Okay, perpendicular parking along 16th between D and C.
Yep,
C not being built, but
yeah.
yeah, okay. I do think that one of the advantages of the mini roundabout, or whatever it is we were calling it, the traffic calming device, that I found attractive was potentially the possibility of being able to deploy it elsewhere. We've certainly heard from neighborhoods in more than one instance that they need traffic calming, specifically traffic slowing devices. M Avenue, near the Strandberg cottages at Anacortes, we heard this. And I was looking forward to deployment of one of these devices as an example, maybe at someone else's expense, like this project is, so that we could look at it for other locations as well. I've seen these as precast concrete islands that maybe could be put down at very small expense and not interrupt stormwater flows and those kinds of things. But the raised crosswalk, depending on how raised it is, I guess will perform a similar function here on this street, and that's good. Because we're punching in a new street, and I think we need to be very sensitive to the neighborhood and the potential change in traffic patterns as a result of making this connection. I mean, more grid connections are generally better, but especially given people's preference for getting onto D Avenue and bypassing some other locations. I had worried in the past that they might speed down this street, and this is not like a fully built out street. I mean, this street was gravel not that many years ago. So if that becomes an issue, I think we'll need to revisit it, of course, but hopefully that raised crosswalk will help in the meantime.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini?
did I hear you say the height of that raised crosswalk, and I'm assuming it's like a gradual slope, is like 6
Yeah.
inches?
If I remember correctly, yes. It's
pretty-
very gradual. It's
a big
not
speed
a
bump.
speed bump. It's more of a much wider speed bump. It's a 10-foot wide, long speed bump.
Okay, and then I just had another question about the traffic, because I remember, I wasn't sitting up here when this originally came forward, but I remember sitting out there and seeing the design, and it being mentioned as this could be a possible model for other places in the city, like up on Kansas, when we eventually hopefully push that all the way through. When we're talking about a traffic calming circle, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but over on the west side on Anacortes, there is a traffic calming circle there, right? Is that what we're talking about essentially? It's right by Tercey Park?
Similar, but I believe that the discussion is more around a smaller one that you can't drive over the top of.
Oh, so you wouldn't be able to drive over the top of a traffic calming circle?
I think that's what Councilmember Moulton was speaking about, yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Cleary McGrath?
have we deployed this elevated crosswalk other places?
There's one on 29th Street that over the years has lost its effectiveness over time. It's settled a little bit, but that would be the closest example that I can think of off the top of my head.
29th and what? Do you remember?
It's mid-block between Commercial and I believe it's by the new cottage project,
Oh, okay.
apartment buildings there. By the park, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would really like to see a map of this, just makes it easier when we're doing that final. I was trying to look back and I can't find it off the top of my head, but it's been a while for those of us not on Public Works Committee.
Member Miller?
Mr. Young?
No, just, since I moved here, I've been, I live north of there, 29th, and, that bump, has been quite effective over the course of time for me. So, I think if something similar, for me, I think it'll do the point that they're attempting to address in this whole process.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I am a fan of the speed table, and I believe the one at 29th Street, as you're talking, when, about 15 years ago or so, it was significant. Now I think it barely exists. So I would be in favor of making it exist again in its former state. And also, I know we keep talking about 32nd Street and the crossing between the retirement home and doing something like there. So I'm definitely in favor of those small, round things that you have to drive around, but I'm also very much in favor of a raised crosswalk speed table, and I believe we'll deploy one of those at the intersection of 11th Street when we're redoing the intersection at 12th. So when we're redoing that 11th to 13th Street section of Commercial, I believe there's a raised crosswalk at the 11th Street intersection. I feel, Mr. Ingham, would you mind coming up, telling us all about it?
It's a raised intersection, like the entire intersection, so that'll be a bit different than a raised kind of crossing.
Okay, so, all right, I'm gonna need to see an image of that too in a future time, because I'm really, just because again, like safety and at that intersection is lacking for everyone, drivers, pedestrians. So I think this is just an ongoing conversation that I want to stay on, because I think this is a really good way to improve safety for drivers as well as people who are not in cars.
Yeah, that entire project is a huge safety improvement from 11th through 13th, so I hope you'll be very happy with it.
Mayor
Yeah,
Miller?
Thanks.
Just
Mr.
a
Fantini.
point of information. If you click on the 7/10/2023 link that's on the agenda bill, it will actually take you to the meeting where the maps are located. So if you're really interested, you can get there pretty quickly. It took
While I'm hovering over this mic too, a small traffic circle, we don't have opposition to doing one. We just ask that when we do one, we do it in an intersection that's actual live intersection. I saw one actually this weekend in Kirkland. I almost jumped out to get a picture of it for you guys because it was just in the middle of this block, and it was, I don't think it has the effect that we would hope for, like it would in an actual intersection where there's two crossing roads.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
No, I'm open. I've always been open to discussions. I've never really been a fan of those. But we'll see. Unless there's any other questions about this particular agenda bill, I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign contract 22-213-TRN-003 with Fisher Construction Group, Inc. in the amount of $1,170,236.25 to perform 16th Street and D Avenue improvement.
second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Young and a second by Mr. Fantini to approve the contract as presented. Additional discussion?
Mayor Mellon?
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
So has this changed significantly from the July 10th, 2023 design?
Not a lot. I will send you tomorrow, though, the plan set, the current plan set. There's not much change from, well, go ahead.
The one significant change is that the improvements from 17th to 18th dropped off because those weren't part of, that was an add-on to the project that we were no longer doing because that was going to be a city-funded portion of the project.
Okay. Whoops, Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleland, Ms. Moulton, and then Ms. Cleland McGrath. Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, sorry.
Yeah, getting the plans after we approve it just defeats the point of having the plan. So I really would like to get these in the packet, even if it seems redundant, because this is a really important project and it is getting funded, and we got to use our money smart and take advantage of these very slim opportunities to try new things. So it's frustrating to not get that simple thing in the packet, and yeah.
Ms.
Mayor
Moulton?
Miller, thank you. So I agree with Ms. Cleland McGrath. I mean, if she hadn't just asked like what else is different, we wouldn't know that anything else was different. So we can look at the old plans, but they're not the current plans. And it's not even our money, which is great in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I think I just think no matter whose money it is, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing what, we know what we're doing.
If you're looking at something from 2023, those were never actually, that was like preliminary sketches, I believe. I wasn't with the city at that time, but I don't think that those were any sort of official plan set.
Okay, so I'm just going to say for the record that I'm not comfortable voting for this without having final plans in front of me.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters, then Mr. Fantini.
I am looking at the 2023 sketches, and which, by the way, are fine, you know, for our purposes for determining scope of work. What dropped off from 17th to 18th? What is that?
I believe my understanding was that was an agreement at some point in the preliminary setup that the city would pay for that section of the project. And when it moved on, we didn't have the budget for that anymore, so we pulled it off and just kept what the Samish Nation was paying for.
What was going to happen?
Just sidewalk on the east side of D to connect to 18th Street, to the existing
So this was
sidewalks.
along D Avenue between 17th and 18th. So is 16th to 17th getting built as part of this contract?
Yes.
So what's happening from 16th to 17th? Sidewalk improvements?
Sidewalk improvements.
Okay, so there were going to be more sidewalk improvements for another block.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what's going away? Or that's what's not included in this scope? Those additional sidewalk improvements for that?
Yeah, it was just
next-
on just one side of the road.
On just one side? Yeah. And the other side already has sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Fantini, and then Ms. Cleland McGrath.
I'm totally fine with waiting until we have final plans. Just a question, when we get those final plans, if we want to change something, we can?
Mr. Rayum, why don't you come up here?
Or is it just for us to check that it's,
So the plan set's final. What you're approving now is the contractor's bid estimate. So we put it out to bid as a full package, 100% design. The bidder is bid on it, and so what you have in front of you is to authorize the city to contract with that contractor to build the project.
okay,
So yeah, we can't change the plan set in any way.
got it.
Mayor Miller?
No, Ms. Cleland McGrath is next, and then Mr. Young.
Thank you. So I guess we're stuck in a hard place because I would prefer to approve this. I would also prefer to wait till next week to see the things, but the problem is we aren't going to meet next week because we may not have quorum. So now we're pushing it 2 weeks, which is not fair to our partner organization, Samish. So I'm curious, are there any comments that anyone wants to make? I know we've got Samish partnership here. We haven't asked for any public comment on this. I guess since we don't have the maps, I guess we're not gonna get the maps up here tonight to just get this done. Could we pause for 5 minutes? You guys can go pull up the maps and then we can come back to this. We've got a couple other things on the agenda. I know this seems kind of ridiculous probably, because you guys have seen it a lot, but this is just setting a precedent. We gotta see this stuff. So if possible, can we just move this to the end of the agenda and you can give us a quick overview and this can happen still tonight?
We can do that, Mayor, if you're okay
Okay.
with it.
Yeah.
You want to just table it for now, and then
Yep.
we'll put it at the end of the agenda?
All right, so you'll withdraw your motion there, Mr. Young, and table it till the final agenda item.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Can I make a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Young. Oh, sorry, I think you were next. Sorry.
All right, thank you. I totally agree with the sentiment about, not setting the precedent. I think I totally agree with that, and that's what we want to make sure that doesn't happen. But to be candid, we went over this in our committee meetings any number of times as we were looking at the drawings for Samish, the thought in the committee meeting about whether or not it should be a concrete roundabout. Mr. Walters brought that up several times in there, and I think we've had this discussion. Am I right, Mr. Rayon? And so we've laboriously gone over it and over it and over it. And when we came up with a solution that we could push forward, I'm just saying I totally agree with the thought of having the final designs. And I know sometimes that there are times when questions come up, but in committee, we went over this and we decided what we were going to do in committee, and we approved for the department to go forward.
Mayor Miller.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton and then Mr. Walters.
So the planning committee doesn't decide how the council is going to move forward. The planning committee makes recommendations. And we did talk about this multiple times, but as it just came up, something else changed that we didn't know about. And we owe it to ourselves and to our community to see what those plans are before we commit and approve. I am not comfortable approving something that I literally don't know what it looks like. And it would establish a very negative precedent. What if that happens again at 11th to 13th? Like, if it's like, okay, that we don't have to see it, we're just gonna trust that it's what we want. I mean, we owe it to our constituents to do our due diligence, and this is a part of that.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters and then Mr. Young.
I just want to correct the record. I do think it's the Public Works Committee that Mr. Young was referring to, which is a committee that Mr. Young, myself, and Ms. Moulton sit on. Public Works Committee cannot approve any course of action. We're only a committee. We don't have the ability to do that.
Mr. Young.
Mayor Miller, Mr. Walters, I'm quite clear on the responsibility of the committee. What I was suggesting was that this discussion was had in that committee. You know, the discussion about what it looks like, what we do, how we get there, part of that is what happens in a committee. And that's where the function of the committee is to voice your concerns then. I'm not disagreeing with the fact that there are additional questions to come up. I'm not. But, you know, I do think that we have laboriously gone over this and over this and over this again. I will agree, as I said in my earlier statement, that I don't want to set a precedent. That's why I've withdrawn my motion, but I want to be clear that in that committee meeting, we went over it, we looked at it, we asked questions, and we did it a multitude of times. I'm just simply saying enough already. Let's get to the bottom line of what our objections are, and let's move this forward with all due respect to all of you, because I agree with you on the points you're making.
All right. Well, in all of that awesome, wonderful debate, we had time, it looks like, for staff to get some maps. And I will turn it back over to the Public Works team, or I guess to council with what part of the maps that you want to see. Because obviously there's a lot in the line sets.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton, thank you.
Yes, I think that it was what the city was going to pay for, but now we're not, like where we're not going to do the sidewalks as planned.
I'm not sure you're going to have line sets of what's not going to be done. Or
If it can be pointed out.
So this is just the vicinity map. So down here from 17th to 18th, there was just going to be a sidewalk filling in this sidewalk gap, but that's no longer part of the project. Everything else should be essentially the same from when it was first proposed.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
So there is sidewalk north of there on both sides of the street?
Yeah. A little slow.
Mayor Mellon.
Mr. Walters.
Is there a rationale that we didn't, for not including that segment of sidewalk?
At the time, we didn't have any sidewalk budget left to do it within. We didn't have the budget to do it.
But assumedly, it would be cheaper to do it now than to do it later, right?
Likely. I mean, yeah.
I mean, you'd save proportional mobilization costs, those kinds of things.
And so you're asking about the parking on 16th. This is the new section of 16th. D Avenue is just off the limits right here. And so we have the head-in parking, the perpendicular parking, and then the parallel parking. And this is where the elevated crosswalk will be.
That all looks good to me. I think I'm okay moving this project forward, especially now that we see the drawings. Let me give an example of why it wouldn't be okay, just in an alternative universe. You brought forward some plans and they show all back-in angle parking. I think we all lose our minds, you know, especially if we didn't have the plans and approved it in lieu of having those plans. So that's why I think it's useful to just set the precedent has been mentioned here, that we need those drawings. We used to not receive, during my time on council, there was a time when we didn't receive contracts at all. We were just asked to approve a sheet of paper that said the contract is approved. And so we have progressed. We still don't typically receive all the specs and diagrams that are part of a public works contract because it's all big pieces of paper and 100 pages and that kind of thing. And I'm not advocating that. But you know, some simpler version in your presentation or in the packet, I think, is what we need. And we could reduce that to writing in a council procedure amendment. But I do think that's our generalized expectation. I'm okay with the change to the space between 17th and 18th. I wish we were doing the sidewalk because I feel like frequently it comes up that there's an opportunity to do a sidewalk where someone else is paying for it. In some cases, it's a private landowner doing development or someplace else like this where a whole different entity is paying for the road project. And if we can piggyback on any time like that, which I think has been our practice in the past, that makes sense to me because otherwise, how are these things, you know, getting done? It's nice to say, well, private development is going to do them in the future, and maybe they will, but that may also be 30 years from now. So I do advocate doing that whenever we reasonably can. And a block of sidewalk, especially where there's an existing curb, shouldn't be that expensive, I would think. Anyway, I'm okay moving this forward at this point.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
This is my last question. So across D Avenue, did we talk about the crosswalks across D and rapid flashing beacons? Can you describe that or point that out on the map real quick?
There'll be one at 15th. So this is the corner. This is 15th and D, and there'll be one at 17th, and then there'll be two at the 16th crossing. So there'll be 4 crossings on D Avenue and 4 sets of RFBs.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
So can we put those sidewalk connections somewhere on a list to get to in the near future? I mean, I know that there's a lot of folks that end up parking west of D Avenue when there's soccer Saturdays and things like that. So there's a lot of kids, a lot of families, a lot of dogs and children running around, and D Avenue is a really busy road, so the more sidewalks we can have, especially now that we're gonna have these awesome crosswalks, the better. And that hill, people go incredibly fast going down. So, you know, it seems like a valuable thing to have in the near future.
I have a list of sidewalk apps, and it's on there.
Awesome, thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
Just to make sure I'm clear, I think that after the discussion, I'm going to assume that we're able to move forward? Is that what we're saying? Or you're satisfied? Okay, I'm very happy. All right, so then I'm going to move that the city council authorize the mayor to sign contract 22-213-TRN-003 with Fisher Construction Group, Inc., in the amount of $1,178,236.25 to perform the 16th Street and D Avenue improvement.
Second.
The motion by Mr. Young and a second by Mr. Fantini to approve the contract as presented. Additional discussion.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
So I just want to drive home this point because I think we've introduced some lack of clarity in this discussion. The Public Works Committee or any committee cannot approve projects, changes to projects, any aspect of a project. I think we have been clear on this in the past, but in case some of this discussion introduced some confusion, Public Works should not expect that that Public Works can pitch project changes to the committee and get anything other than our feedback. If you want which most of the time is all you really need because you're making these decisions on your own anyway. But if you want our approval, you've got to come to the full council. And I think all of us understand that. But I don't want to leave anyone with any confusion.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
No, I just want to echo what Mr. Walters said. That is absolutely true. I guess the point that I was initially making in that is that we, in committee, one of the things we do is we have a vigorous discussion. And we work with staff and team and we talk about it. And so from there, it goes back and then it comes to the full council. That's the point that I'm making all along. So we're in agreement. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the clarification, and thank you for the partnership with Samish. I think this is a great project that we're working together with them, and I know it's been a long time coming, especially getting the crosswalks for D Avenue. So with that, Mr. Hoagland, would you get a motion by Mr. Young and a second by Mr. Fantini to approve the contract as presented? Mr. Young, or Mr. Hoagland, would you take the vote, please?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And we're staying on our regular order. Item 6C, this is a temporary construction easement for Cascade Natural Gas relocation project. This is an action item. Ms. Swetnam.
Thank you, Mayor Miller and members of council and members of the audience. So I'm presenting this, but I'm also, you just saw Mr. Lee back there, and he is the one that's really been working with Cascade Natural Gas on this project. So this is a request that the city received from Cascade Natural Gas for 2 temporary construction easements. The background here is Cascade Natural Gas is relocating a regulator station that was previously located within city right-of-way within the area of the MJB development. And so the city, pursuant to the franchise agreement that we have with Cascade Natural Gas, asked them to relocate that regulator station. So it's currently being relocated to the corner of R Avenue and 22nd Street. At the beginning of that relocation process, the city granted Cascade Natural Gas a construction easement to allow them to do that work. Part of the work, I believe, is within city property. Part of it is within MJB property. So the conditions on the ground, namely that there's a swale there, requires Cascade Natural Gas to modify that existing swale, and I think it has something to do with the slope. And so that work falls outside the current footprint of the existing temporary easement. So Cascade Natural Gas reached out. The 2 easements that are requested, the reason why we have 2 different easements, one is on Skagit County parcel 112899, and the other is on 77984. And staff is recommending approval, but I have maps, so. Here is the shaded area is the area that they're requesting the easement for on property 112899. I'm going to show you an aerial image in a minute so you can put it in context. But that kind of, you can see there's the diagonal swath of land there, and that's the Tommy Thompson Trail. 22nd Street runs along the top of the map. R Avenue, or our street, is along the left side. Here's the proposed easement area on parcel 77984. And again, the hatched area is the requested easement area, and that's the location of the Tommy Thompson Trail. So you can see here's and I apologize for not having the easement areas outlined on this map, but this is the kind of the second parcel that we looked at, and it's this little triangle right here for the first one. So I have reviewed, and in fact, we did some negotiation with Cascade Natural Gas on the language in this easement to make sure that it wouldn't disrupt the public's use of the Tommy Thompson Trail either during construction or afterwards. So Logan's reviewed the legal description, and staff is comfortable with moving these forward, and I think we're both here to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Ms. Swetnam about how awesome the maps are? No, I'm sorry. Questions for Ms. Swetnam?
I learned that lesson already, so no offense, Logan.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
So what are they going to do in that easement area if they're not going to disrupt the Tommy Thompson Trail?
Great question. I'm going to defer to Mr. Lee on that one.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So they're not going to disrupt the public's access to the Tommy Thompson Trail because that's a condition of the easement. What are they going to do? Because that's kind of most of it, and it goes right through the
It's hard
middle.
to see, but their station easement that they currently have goes kind of in this area, if you see my mouse. There's a very small swale right here that they just need to slightly push over a little bit to provide enough, because they're going to have to slope the ground more drastically than they originally thought because of that swale there. So they're just going to shift this over, but their actual work won't go to where the Tommy Thompson Trail is.
So it'll be kind of in the grass there.
Yeah, it's all, the only work is taking place is right in this area. They just asked for a little bigger easement just to make sure that they didn't have to come back again.
Okay. And this is time limited?
Right,
Or
it is. It's connected to the construction project, so as soon as that work is done, then the easement is done.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Clellan McGrath?
I move we authorize Mayor Miller to execute 2 temporary construction easements between the City of Anacortes and Cascade Natural Gas Corporation regarding the relocation and installation of a regulator station to the corner of R Avenue and 22nd Street.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Clellan McGrath, second by Ms. Hubick to approve the easements as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Hoagland, vote please.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Final item is item 6D on other business, contract award for the wastewater treatment plant incinerator evaluation and solids system planning. So discussion item with possible action. Mr. Walker.
Mayor,
Welcome.
Council, tonight we're talking about proposal
And
25.
Brian, can you get to the microphone in front of you and make sure it's on?
Are we on? There we
Is the
go.
green light on?
It is.
Okay, all right.
Tonight we're talking about proposal 25-052-SEW-001. Because I think everybody here has a pretty good understanding of what we do down there, I'll just give a very brief bit of history. The city runs an SSI, a sewage sludge incinerator, and it incinerates all of its biosolids. We are one of an ever-decreasing number of cities to do this. In fact, we are one of the 3 remaining in Washington state. We fired that incinerator up in 1992, and we have had 33 successful years of operation. And in that 33 years, it has been the sole means of biosolids management. 100%, every pound of the biosolids produced by the city has gone through that incinerator. It has been meticulously maintained, expertly operated, but it is quite aged. In the last 2 years, we have had numerous age-related shutdowns of this machine, and the complete rebuild that it is now in the market for is estimated to cost up to several $1 million, and that dollar value is budgeted in the 2026 capital budget. So the question at hand is, does it make sense, does it make financial sense to go ahead and do this work? I don't have the answer for that. I don't think any one person does have the answer for that. So what we're proposing is a consulting contract with Brown and Caldwell to provide us assurance in our path forward. We are seeking the collective expertise of Brown and Caldwell, and just as importantly, the individual expertise of several key industry leaders, one Greg Makos and one Lloyd Winchell, people who will actually be on site doing the work for us. What we're seeking is a two-stage contract. It's important to note that both stages of this contract have separate notices to proceed written into the contract. The first stage, for the sum of $113,600, is for Brown and Caldwell to conduct physical and operational inspection of the incinerator, conduct a financial analysis for operations in relation to the Quad L 50% rule, deliver a technical memorandum for rehabilitation of the incinerator, and deliver an incinerator bypass plan if, or rather when, the unit has to go offline. The second stage of the contract, if the first stage does not provide us a very clear-cut reason to proceed with rehabilitation of the incinerator, the second stage for the sum of $185,400 is for biosolids alternative planning. Brown and Caldwell is tasked with assessing the universe of biosolids alternatives that we could do, something other than incineration. They would assign values based on both economic and non-economic criteria. They would eliminate fatally flawed approaches and technologies, and they would engage in a multi-criteria decision analysis, which is intended to be a transparent process for all of the stakeholders. At the end of this entire contract, which would take approximately 1 year, we should have an answer to the original question, an answer hopefully that would transcend any one of us in this room and would stand the test of time for when we do decide to proceed. Any questions?
Mayor Miller?
All right, Mr. Walters.
How would you characterize the threshold at which you will decide to pull the trigger on phase 2 of this? I'm very interested in phase 2, but you're not necessarily going to do it. So how will you determine whether you are going to
I don't think it's entirely up to me whether we'll proceed with that we're going to be seeking input from the stakeholders, which includes elected officials, on whether we should proceed with that. You guys may remember that approximately 4 years ago, this proposal was in front of you. And at that time, the outfall happened, and so we did not proceed down the road at that time. So if the answer is not very clear-cut, that it is very clearly the best path forward to spend several $1 million on this aging incinerator, then I would recommend going ahead with that process.
So you think it's maybe more likely than not?
Yes.
Okay. And do you happen to know offhand, round figures, your volume or weight of solids that you're generating on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, annual? Like how much solids are we incinerating today?
Approximately 2 dry tons per day.
2
dry tons per day.
2 dry tons per day.
Which is different from wet tons.
Sure.
Those are the units that we have to report to ecology on.
Okay. What volume is that? Do you know?
That is about a dump truck load.
Per day?
When it's hydrated.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
Just out of curiosity, you said that we're one of 3 cities that still use this process?
Correct.
What are the other 2 cities?
Vancouver, Washington, and Bellingham, Washington, and Brown and Caldwell is involved with both of those facilities.
Okay, and they're evaluating, other options?
Correct.
Just doing the evaluation of the current process, and then other things that may be possible, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Isn't Bellingham the city that was considering a $1 billion replacement of their
Yes, they were.
system? Was that more than just their incinerator?
They have come full circle and are now re-upping an investment in incineration.
They are. Can you say that a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, we want to get it over. Yeah.
I don't know if I should speak for the city of Bellingham, but they have been engaged in this process for quite a few years now.
Okay. And so did you say that they are considering reinvesting in incineration?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you. So I see that there's this 50% rule assessment, which I take to understand that once we spend on maintenance to fix it, if we get above 50% of the cost of the original incinerator adjusted for inflation, is that right? Then we are required to do a major, we're required to replace it then?
That is correct. That is part of 40 CFR Part 60, the Quad L subpart, and it is a piece of legalese that's under intense debate, which is one of the reasons we would like Brown and Caldwell to help interpret and mediate it for us. Generally speaking, if you get to 50% expenditure interest adjusted from what you originally spent on that incinerator, you cross that line in the sand, you are now considered a new source, at which point you are beholden to new source standards, and your operation costs just got a lot more expensive.
Okay, and I know, thank you for that, and I know that there are some regulatory changes that have been coming down the pike for ages and have not quite solidified yet to our knowledge. Is that, so if we get to that point, will we have some kind of a grace period if the new regulations aren't out? I mean, it seems like the timing on this could be tricky, but could you explain that to me?
I would not anticipate the federal regulations to change again anytime soon. The SSI rule was promulgated in 2017, and we have been operating under a petition since then. In fact, we do not currently have our Title V air operating permit. That's still in draft form, waiting review. And so that is, the timing of this analysis actually could not be better because our air operating permit is, again, up for review very shortly here. And so having Brown and Caldwell engaged in that process would be very valuable.
Great, thanks. And I just want to mention that I had a tour of the wastewater treatment plant a couple of weeks ago, and Mr. Walker and Ms. Hamburg and Mr. Diebler showed me and two friends around, one who works at the wastewater treatment plant in East Sound, and another person who's considering a career in wastewater treatment, and I hope she considers us if she pursues that. But anyway, it was fantastic. It was fascinating. It was really fun to geek out on all the information that we wanted to know and that they were happy to share with us. So I highly recommend a tour for council members if you get a chance.
All right, any other questions?
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini?
I move that the city, if there's no other discussion, I move that the city council authorize the mayor to sign contract 25-052-SEW001 with Brown and Caldwell in the amount of $299,000 to perform the wastewater treatment plant incineration evaluation and solid system planning.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Fantini and a second by Mr. Walters to approve the contract as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Hoagland, vote please.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. And being no further business for the council, I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Have a good night.